Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my side softer?
Can I make my side firmer? Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. And now it's our lowest price of the season on our top-selling i8 smart bed. Your best savings plus special financing. Exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. All Sleep Number smart beds offer temperature solutions for your best sleep. Learn more at sleepnumber.com.
Hey, everybody, it's Devin.
And me. Season 4, Kate.
We're back.
Season 4 sauce.
Hi, everyone.
You didn't even say welcome to Medcrimes. Come on, Devin. Get it over with.
Oh, my God.
What is happening? Did you forget how to Medcrimes?
Welcome to Medcrimes.
That was really embarrassing for me.
Wow.
Season 4 is up to a great
I do
start.
a redo, but there you go. We said season 4 would get bloopers, so
No, I'm keeping
out of
it.
the blue.
Yep. Season 4 is getting bloopers.
Out of the blue.
This one's hitting the bloopers hard.
I hope you guys missed us as much as we, first of all, missed each other because, Kate,
yes.
I missed you.
But we hope that all of you guys had an incredible holiday season. So psyched to be back with a whole beautiful docket and schedule of crazy content because, oh my God, there is no shortage.
Over this break, like Kate and I kind of had an idea that we were going to do this topic for the season 4 opener. We threw that out a couple months ago because it's been highly requested for a while. But we have shared some shit of content, and you and I are both like, what is happening out there? Like,
I want to know, I just want to know, how do so many bad healthcare workers still exist? And it's very upsetting to me. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm with you. We've shared a lot of ideas that might come out for future episodes. You know, there's been a lot of arrests and different things happening. We obviously need information first, you know, to be able to have enough and find out what's legit and, you know, what's just social media rumor and things like that. But man, what was your favorite part about your break?
Obviously Thanksgiving, obviously Christmas, and like the family time. And I gotta say, like, I love the Christmas season now. And specifically, I think my favorite day of the entire year is Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, it's so magical for the kids. And you get to be that magic maker. Yep.
Same. Yep. I really do love the magic of Christmas Eve as well.
Just so magical and beautiful.
Unfortunately, I didn't get to enjoy that.
Oh God, poor Devin. I shouldn't have said that because I know what happened to you on Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve, Devin had the stomach bug, so that was great. I've been adjusting to new life over the last few months, right? With a career, not a career change, I'm still in healthcare, but a job change that has been allowing me to have a lot more flexibility and home time and presence with my kids. And I will say that my favorite thing over the break is spending that time with the family. You know, school has been closed for 2 weeks and I didn't really super stress about childcare. Thankful for the job that I have.
I was WFH queen now, everybody.
I have been able to, you know, the day before school break, my son had school for like 3 hours. And in that 3 hours, I attended his school sing-along. And, you know, Thanksgiving luncheon and just, you know, so that I think has been my highlight is being able to have a role that I love, but also, you know, but also be able to spend so much time with my family and just not have to feel divided.
And those of you who had work on Christmas Eve, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, we've all been there.
We've been there.
Thank you for everything you've done. Thank you. Before we get to the beef, before we get to the juicy meat of this story, we have Patreons. New Patreons. Laureen's single name. Laureen, very sexual single name. I love you. We have Justin Ware. Hi, Justin.
Hey, Justin.
And we have Antonia Beaumont.
Oh.
Rare. 3 rares for
Nice.
these people. Thank you guys so much. And thank
Welcome
you to
to the
all of our
family.
fans. We love you all. I have decided that you 3 are Makaras.
Do tell.
Okay, Makaras are from Hindu mythology. They are recurrent as a theme in like Buddhist lore, and if you go back through like old Buddhist tomes, you'll see these like illustrated over and over again. They are gods and goddesses of the ocean, and they're like part human and part fish or mermaid on the end. And they are thought to be guardians of entryways, transitional periods, and throne rooms.
That's perfect
Specifically.
for our first episode of 25 and
I
season
literally
4
think
because
so.
we are so in transitional period.
We really are. And also this pod lab is sort of like a throne room.
I mean, it
Like,
is really.
So you
The
3
queen is sitting
Makaras,
behind you.
I can feel you all 3 around me. And yes, she is. You're right. I can feel all 3 of you around me, just like guarding my throne room, which is my basement. So thank you for all of you for guarding my throne room. I appreciate you. Anyway, now we can get into
I promise we'll get back to our rhythm.
the hot, juicy meat that is Paolo Macchiarini. Macchiarini. And I looked that up, and that is how you pronounce it in Italialand.
Listen to you in
You are
your
welcome.
Italian.
You have to do the chef fingers though when you do it. Macchiarini. You know the chef hand
Yep.
that I'm talking about. So this guy is a thoracic surgeon from Europe, and he was a former regenerative medicine researcher and physician who was initially hailed as this like super surgeon and pioneer in the field of regenerative medicine. And we will get into a little bit more about like what that entails, what that means. And later on became known for research fraud, manipulative behavior, and just generally being a dick and a complete cowboy and very cavalier with people's lives. And it ended with people, getting this procedure done, and he had just about 0 good outcomes from that. He was actually convicted of research-related crimes in Italy and Sweden, and his fraudulent behavior eventually led to patient deaths that were just 100% preventable, which is really, really sad. And we're going to start sort of at the very beginning. We don't know a ton about his childhood. So Paolo was born August 22nd, 1958 in Basel, Sweden. And while he was born in Sweden, he spent time throughout his career sort of all over the world, primarily all over Europe. But you'll hear me talk about him sort of putting down roots and becoming affiliated with hospitals all over the continent. So Russia, Germany, Spain, Portugal, Germany, France, Sweden, Italy. The list goes on and on and on.
It really
and on.
was kind of world renowned, if that's what you want to say,
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So he attended medical school at the University of Pisa in 1986, and he obtained his Master of Surgery in 1991, which is like the US equivalent of completing a residency program in the field of general surgery. And he claimed that he was a fellow for approximately 2 years in the Department of Thoracic Surgery in the United States as well, at the University of Alabama at Birmingham in 1989. Although later on, when we tried to look at records from all of this, they did not have a Department of Thoracic Surgery, nor do they currently have one.
You used the word claims, so I was about to ask you if that was untrue.
Very untrue. And what we'll find out about this guy is that a lot of his resume was just fucking fantasy. He claimed he completed a thoracic surgery fellowship in Alabama. That is not true. They didn't even have that. So he ended up obtaining some degree certificates, a master's in organ and tissue transplantation, which was dated 1994, and then a doctorate in the same, dated 1997, from the University of Franche-Comté, in France. So, I mean, he didn't like fake his degree, didn't fake these certifications, but there were a lot of things on his resume that was just not
He was
true.
actually a doctor.
He
We know
was
that.
like at the bare minimum. He
At
did
the bare minimum.
he did check that box at the very least. He had a ton of affiliations in hospitals and universities throughout all of these countries that I mentioned. So Spain, England, Italy, France. This guy is everywhere. He would perform quote unquote studies and quote unquote research sort of independently. And he started putting out all these research papers and essays on all these, trials that he ran. He became very quickly known for his interest early on in regenerative medicine and his affinity for thoracic medicine and thoracic surgery in particular. And something he wanted to pioneer was within both transplant and regenerative medicine fields, and this was something he became quickly known for. What is regenerative medicine, you ask?
I think it's pretty freaking awesome. That's what it is.
It is. The idea behind it is that sometime in the future, we will be able to transplant organs which are synthetic using a mixture of synthetic materials and the patient's own biological materials. So, really great thought. It's a very fast growing science, and actually the technology behind it is like fascinating. It's really freaking cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, very early in his career, Paolo, is seen as a pioneer in his field because immediately he's quickly gaining some notoriety just based on the research papers and things like the trials that he's putting out. And in particular, he's focusing his attention on diseases of the trachea. And it occurred to him being that the trachea is literally a windpipe. It is one of the simpler organs in our bodies, right? And, structurally, it's fairly simple. Like
fairly simple, has a very important job.
Well, of course, yeah, fairly simple,
Stays
but
open so we can breathe.
critical to our
Yes.
survival and function as a human being, right? So he's like, what if we took a synthetic tube, like a medical grade silicone, and coated it or seeded it with the patient's own stem cells, which would, in theory, help this new trachea sort of integrate within the patient's biome and lessen the chance that it would be rejected as a new transplant material. So he takes this and he's like, I mean, this is something that could work. In theory, it does make sense.
Right.
If we were going to try to do this with any organ in the body, the trachea is probably not a bad place to start with, just in terms of accessibility, in terms of how critical the need is for a new trachea if you have a disease of the trachea that is incurable, and the simplicity of the structure itself. So
the thought is excellent.
The thought is excellent. The theory is excellent. So Macchiarini was a visiting professor and director on a temporary contract at Sweden's Karolinska Institute, beginning around 2010. And he sort of applied for this position with this very fantastical resume, listing all of these different accolades and certifications that he had, some of which he had, some of which he did not. And he just inflated his resume to reflect that he had all of these qualifications. He also additionally was hired based on all of this beautiful research that he had done. We find out that he didn't actually run any actual trials.
He made it up.
Made this up. There's a lot that he did not do that he said that he did. He all of a sudden made headlines in around 2010 internationally that a surgeon practicing in Sweden had carried out the world's first organ transplant using a synthetic organ. And he did this with the assistance of an international surgery team. It was not just him in the operating room with a team. This was a massively collaborative effort from multiple surgeons, multiple specialists, multiple other regenerative medicine experts all coming together and trying this for the first time. And the patient was a man suffering from tracheal cancer. This was Andemariam Teklesenbet Bayem. was his name. And I apologize if I'm butchering that. I did look that up and I did my best with that. He was a man from Sweden who was earning a master's degree over in Iceland when he was diagnosed with tracheal cancer. And he was treated with chemotherapy and surgery in 2009. But in 2011, his trachea became obstructed again because the mass had regrown. And his doctors had actually recommended palliative care. Because at that point, he'd been through all this treatment. The cancer is back.
Absolutely.
His prognosis is quite poor at this point.
Right.
At that time, his doctors also reached out to Macchiarini because at the time, he was just, sort of adjacent over in Sweden at the KI, which
Hop,
is
skip,
the
and a jump.
Hop, skip, and a jump, a stone's throw, if you will,
Hop, skip, and a jump.
over at the Karolinska Institute. And they thought, if anybody's going to be able to help this guy, it's going to be this guy who's like on the forefront. And, it could very well be that, if you're the first person to actually receive a transplanted trachea, you're a guy that needs it, because without it, you're going to die anyway. You know what I mean? So collaborated with scientists all over the place. Mostly there were a couple scientists and physicians from University College at London, and they manufactured together a fully synthetic trachea with an engineered scaffold seeded with Bayan's marrow cells, so his stem cells, essentially. And they had been able to replace tracheas before. Replacing tracheas with donor tracheas is a thing. That is something that can happen. That is something that happens. But this was the first time using a synthetic trachea for this.
And so basically he's trying to do a synthetic, if I understand this correctly, he's taking like a synthetic we made this, but have it covered in its own stem cells.
In his own stem cells,
so that it would regenerate and eventually be an actual real trachea.
Right. Well, so it wouldn't necessarily ever be a real trachea. I mean, he's always going to have, but the idea behind the stem cells is that it will then much easier be able to be accepted into the patient's
as far as like not being rejected and all of that, and having
and
like a permanent
Yes, exactly. We'll talk a little bit about stem cells too, but stem cells are those building blocks that are,
I think they're fascinating.
Cells. They're super, super fascinating. I'm going to do just a very, very brief overview of what they are and why we use those in regenerative medicine. So stem cells are like these building block cells, right? So they're cells that are heavily present in fetal tissue and within our own bone marrow. They're essentially cells that haven't really quite been assigned a cell type yet. So, because we have, all sorts of different cells circulating in our body. So we have muscle cells, we have epithelial cells, we have bone cells, organ cells, which are all made up of all these different types of cells. But these stem cells are sort of blank slates, and they have yet to take shape as one specific type of tissue. So they can typically be harvested from blood using a process called apheresis, which is when the blood is drawn from a vein, it's passed through a machine that separates and collects the stem cells, and then the remaining blood is returned to the donor. And the stem cells are what's used to coat the trachea to hopefully help it integrate into that natural biome, if that makes sense. So once the cells are put around other cells, the idea is that they sort of adopt what the genetic material in those other cells and become sort of what that adjacent tissue is. So for example, if we're putting it on a trachea, the idea is that it will sort of see the other trachea cells around it on either end of the implant and say, well, it kind of seems like I'm a fucking trachea cell now.
I mean, I guess so.
And it will then become, an epithelial, a part of the trachea itself. So that's sort of the idea behind it, is that we're taking someone's own stem cells to hopefully create, our own partial organ in there with the help of the synthetic organ. This operation occurred in June 2011. He survived the surgery, and that bought him just wide media coverage. This was huge. He got a front page story.
If it was legit, first of all, it's deservedly so. You know?
Of course, yeah. This was massive. It absolutely put him on the map because he was spearheading this whole thing. and everybody is sort of looking at this guy, you know, the world is looking at this guy saying, wow, this is a guy he's bold, he's taking risks that everybody else is afraid to take, you know, at the time, all in the name sort of advancing regenerative medicine and medicine as a whole. And, you know, once we as a community have achieved this, if we can do this successfully, does this pave the way for the future of regenerative medicine? What
Absolutely.
if some of these concepts and apply it to hearts, lungs, livers, kidneys? Will we someday no longer need to rely on donor tissue to give somebody an organ transplant? Could we manufacture organs for people and have them survive? It's fascinating idea. Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, though, when you're taking all these risks and being a complete cowboy in medicine, the risk isn't yours alone. He sort of tended to really inflate how successful he thought he was going to be with these outcomes. And the patients were sort of given a lot of comfort when it wasn't clear that they were being explained the risks, and it wasn't clear to the patients that this was very experimental.
Correct.
And this had quite literally not been done before.
And that you are quote unquote basically a guinea pig.
Exactly. So
Like,
to be fair, a lot of these patients had no other options. I mean, it was like these patients had very, very poor prognoses.
however, I mean, you're correct. Their prognosis is terrible, right?
Yep.
But when you look at the options of death with dignity in palliative and hospice care versus what they might have actually gone through, which I'm sure you're going to get to.
I agree.
You know?
It was tough to make a case with this guy because they couldn't necessarily prove with how sick these people were to begin with that he caused their death. You know, every single one of them had a terrible outcome, but
right.
That probably would have happened anyways if he hadn't done anything to intervene. So it was hard for them to make a case.
I get it.
It's crazy. So Paolo later stated in an interview with NBC that, quote, when discussing the plan with the patient asked what the survival plan was. And I said, I don't know. He said, what do you mean? And I said, I've never done it before. If you watch some of these interviews, and and I will let you guys know, you know, a couple of podcasts, a couple of different documentaries on this. But if you watch how he interviews, now he talks about himself, how he talks about the procedure, he comes off very charismatic. He is the very,
accent
very,
doesn't
very
hurt,
good.
honestly.
No, it doesn't also hurt that he was like not a bad looking man. Like he was very European George Clooney. And actually, that's how his ex-fiance described like the vibe that he gave off. Like he was just very suave, very smooth, a very good talker, confidence through the roof.
Very demure.
Very demure, very mindful. Not so much. This guy was not demure. Also not very mindful.
No.
Very not mindful at all.
No.
So now, unfortunately, that first patient to receive that transplant, by the end of the year, the implant had failed. He died in January 2013. The autopsy showed that he had a chronic lung infection, a clot in his lung or a PE, and the synthetic trachea was very loose, and it was just kind of wiggling around in there. So it had not adhered. It had not, you know, regenerated into his, you know, the ends of his old trachea like it should have. It just did not do the intended purpose, unfortunately.
And the death, if I'm not mistaken, was sufferable, correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And of course, the media didn't cover this really at all.
No.
There was very limited media coverage. Nobody heard anything. Everyone had just heard that this guy was a super surgeon, and I'm quoting that is what he was known as, was the super surgeon. He was the super surgeon. And there was really no coverage about when patients did poorly. All the coverage was about the advances and all the progress he was making. And meanwhile, he was just having really shitty outcomes. And that's why, you know, all these patients were flocking to him then when they didn't have any other answers and when they had nowhere to turn.
Right.
And everybody was just still hitting him up, still flocking to him, trying to find a way to extend their life, you know, make better quality of life. It's just so sad.
I think even if he was upfront with them, they still would have.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? Especially,
but you need to inform your patients of risks.
Yeah.
Another notable case was that of 2-year-old Hannah Warren, 2 years old.
I can't.
I know. She would go on to be the youngest recipient of one of Paolo's synthetic tracheas. She was born essentially with no windpipe, so she had a congenital malformation where from a very young age, she essentially lived in the hospital. Her entire life lived in the hospital.
Yes.
She required numerous surgeries. She was kept alive on a ventilator and a feeding tube. She had spent her entire life, like I said, in the hospital and was unable to swallow on her own, unable to eat. She could not breathe independently. The idea is that this could be corrected with this trachea implant and would effectively give this very young person, a chance of survival and a chance of better quality of life. And,
Yeah.
for the family who had watched their kid make it to age 2, surviving in a hospital on machines, for them, it's like a no-brainer. I think, for them, it was like, she's going to die of some kind of nosocomial infection or some kind of medical complication. Like, why don't we at least try to see if we can offer her, a chance at a somewhat normal life? Maybe.
Yep.
So they felt like they really didn't have any other options. And like I said, he is a great talker. He is suave, he is smooth, he is debonair, and a
And
decent looking guy.
supposedly has an excellent reputation.
Yeah, and he has
You
his
know?
nickname of the super surgeon. So like that in and of itself is all the confidence that a desperate parent needs when they're faced with a child having a lifelong illness that
Mhm.
will probably eventually kill them.
Yeah.
And it's devastating. So, Hannah Warren's surgery took place in April of 2013, and the operation actually was performed at OSF St. Francis Medical Center in Peoria, Illinois. And the operation involved also her esophagus. And she didn't heal properly, I guess, after the surgery. She required a second operation in June. And unfortunately, on July 6, 2013, she passed away from complications of that second surgery.
It's awful. Absolutely awful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the media is just still feeding into this whole one headline of him being this pioneer of regenerative medicine. No one is really seeing any red flags
And
yet.
same with the families, right? Like the
Yeah,
families are just thinking that like unfortunately, they still think that this trachea regeneration works.
exactly. They're like, this works because that's all. We don't hear that it's not working, and this guy is still a practicing surgeon and he's got
Mhm.
all of these accolades on his resume and he's a great talker and he seems really confident. I don't know. There's
Mhm.
nobody else in the world that can help me. So what choice do I have?
Correct.
So another case is that of Turkish national Yasim Satir underwent a routine surgery in 2011 to treat a condition in her hands. But due to an error during her intubation, her trachea was severely injured and her left lung was damaged essentially beyond repair. And she came to Macchiarini at the KI for treatment. And in 2012, he first removed her left lung and replaced her trachea with a pipe. He then went back in, replaced that initial pipe with one of his fully synthetic and seeded tracheas. And the following year, the implant collapsed and Macchiarini replaced it with a second one. So this is 2 surgeries she's now had. Satir had many, 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 many complications throughout these couple of years and after
Yeah.
the second implant, and remained in constant need of having her airway cleared. She suffered kidney failure as a result of the entire thing. And in 2016, she underwent multiple organ transplants in the US. And ultimately, that synthetic trachea was replaced with one from a cadaver. And she ended up dying from complications from all of this in March 2017. So she suffered for
Mm,
a lot of years, for 5 years.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's so
So
sad.
it is.
That's so sad.
And again in 2010, Macchiarini implanted a seeded donated trachea in a 25-year-old woman in Russia while working with surgeon Vladimir Parshin. And according to her parents, as of mid 2016, she had been unable to speak or stand and only left their home to visit health facilities. And ultimately, she died in 2018 due to complications from chronic pneumonia and a tracheoesophageal fistula and severe malnutrition.
Oh,
Another bad outcome. for Paolo.
And I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, were there any positive outcomes?
No.
Not
Nope.
even one.
Not really. No.
Yeah.
And then another case involves a gentleman named Christopher Lyles, who's a U.S. native. He was diagnosed very young, actually in his 30s, with tracheal cancer. And he was treated
That's
with radiation.
awful.
Oh, it's so sad. He was treated with radiation and surgery. And his case was essentially not considered survivable. His tumor became inoperable because of the size that it ended up being. And it extended, he was in a very late stage, unfortunately. And his family reached out to Macchiarini, actually. And Macchiarini immediately said, I really think I can help you. And he created a fully synthetic trachea seeded with stem cells from Lyles. And in November of 2011, he went to surgery. And unfortunately, the following year, 2012, Lyles died suddenly after he returned home. They'd never performed an autopsy, so we don't have a ton of answers as to exactly what happened.
Right.
The Lyles family did release a statement and said that in this situation, for him, it was do or die. They would not change anything because it's what he wanted. He wanted to fight until the end. And his hope was to further regenerative science and stem cell research. So
I wonder, and I think I can agree with that at the time, but I wonder now, knowing that they didn't have all the information about who he was, if they
Right.
still feel the same way.
Well, exactly. It's hard to say. It's hard to
Yeah.
say. And they did take part in the one of the documentaries, at least one of the documentaries that I know
Yeah.
of about Paolo. So finally, it's 2014, and people are starting to notice the overwhelming amount of bad outcomes.
Right.
It's been a
Like, we
couple of
don't, yeah.
years. People
Well,
are
because you have to,
dying.
like, show your stuff.
Well, that's the thing, is that hospitals these days do keep track of that. At least in the US, they keep track of survival rates for surgeons. Your morbidity and mortality rate is something that is closely followed. And if something starts to look amiss, the hospital knows about it.
Right.
And something needs to be looked at. Something's going on with your technique, with what's happening. So in 2014, he was accused by 4 former colleagues and co-authors of some of his research that he had falsified some claims in his research with KI in response to his poor outcomes regarding his surgery. So what they're saying is that, this guy's had some poor outcomes, but he's still putting out all these papers and research that these surgeries are successful.
That he's
And
just making up.
And he's just sort of making that up or releasing all that. And then, a year or two down the road, these people are dead from complications from all of this. So KI then appointed an external expert group to review these accusations and look at all of his statistics, look at all of his research, and look into his background. So they compared, all of these medical records of the hospital to what he's putting out in terms of research. And the report was released by the university in May of 2015. And investigators found that Macchiarini had committed scientific misconduct in 7 papers by not getting ethical approval for a lot of his operations. And
ethical approval. Let's just focus on that. You didn't even get ethical approval.
No, nobody gave this guy
because what he's doing is not ethical.
Nobody gave this guy the green light to do what he was doing. Nobody. So he also misrepresented the result of these operations, because he's out there doing all these interviews for NBC and saying, like, I am uber successful over here. Like, all of these things are going great, and I wish I need more patients to do this on, and I'm a pioneer and this is going great.
And it was that special that he decided to defraud in his personal life too.
Exactly, and we will get into that more shortly. Oh, also, he had claimed that he had done a lot of testing on animals.
Bullshit.
Nobody was ever able to corroborate that he had tested anything on animals at all.
Bullshit.
In August 2015, after considering the findings and a rebuttal provided by Macchiarini, Anders Hamston found that he had acted, quote, without due care. But they were not
I wonder
willing.
why he didn't get the ethical approval then.
I know. But they were not willing to admit that he had committed actual misconduct, which.
What? Why?
You literally lied in all your research. Like, stop. Just stop. So, now an SVT investigative program began broadcasting this big 3-part series titled Experimentin, which it essentially was like a big sort of investigative journalism piece, like documentary into Macchiarini's work. It was
going to shine another light on him.
It's shining another light, exactly. And then the documentary showed Macchiarini continuing operations with his new transplant method even after it showed little to no promise. And he was exaggerating the health of his patients in articles as they died. And while Macchiarini admitted that the synthetic trachea did not work in its current state, he also did not agree that trying it on several additional patients without further testing had been inappropriate. He defended to the ground what he was doing. He's like, no, this is fine. What he actually said specifically was, did the first heart transplant go great? No. Did the first lung transplant go well? No. You try. But it's
but he's had more than the first. He's had no positive outcomes.
But try in a clinical trial in a controlled environment with people following you and with actual scientific evidence, like evidence-based. There's no evidence that this is working.
He had no animal survive because he didn't even try.
None whatsoever. So he's like, no, I mean, like, I'm not going to test anything, but also this is fine. This is me just
it's fine. Just
gambling with people.
Just let me be.
Exactly. And then allegations were also made that patients' medical conditions, both before and after the operations, as reported in academic papers, did not match reality. So he's like changing a lot of details about patients, like what their medical conditions were. So he's just, again, if there is a complication, blaming it on that pre-existing medical condition and not the fact that they had this crazy surgery that is just not working.
Terrible trachea.
Exactly. So he's inflating his success when he's talking to patients, talking to the media, publishing his studies, and the fact there are no studies. There are no real studies. There is no real research. And people just keep fucking signing up for this.
Right.
Because they're unwitting test subjects. So typically, when one is trying to implement a new medication or new procedure, there are clinical trials. And once a given treatment has been proven in initial studies and animal testing, it has been proven effective, clinical trials take place typically within a research institute with involvement from a clinical team, which is spearheading the trial and research itself. And the patient then has to undergo quite a bit of education regarding this is an experimental treatment they're receiving. Right. You need to be made aware of the risk that you're undertaking by participating in this. And these people follow the patient's progress. If things don't go as hoped or planned, they record that. They change the treatment. But these patients are not getting that. They are not getting that oversight. They are just getting reassurance, false reassurance about the capabilities of this man.
This will make them better.
False promises when this procedure has received absolutely no vetting or controlled trials or studies whatsoever. In the early 2010s, he had encountered an NBC News producer named Benita Alexander. Now, Benita had been tasked by NBC to produce a documentary for Dateline in 2013 called A Leap of Faith. And essentially, this was another one of those, lovely media coverage things to portray Macchiarini in this light,
his wonderfulness.
Exactly. So
superhero.
She met with him. She did this documentary. She later recounted, being instantly attracted to this guy. He was charismatic. He was charming. She's the one that said this guy is European George Clooney. Only to find out later in 2015 that during their so they got together, they got engaged. These people were getting married.
Yep.
Their entire engagement. He had been married for almost 30 years. The entire time. He was married to another person for 30 years.
And Had children.
And he had like a whole bunch of kids with this woman.
Sure did.
So now, if you watch the Netflix,
he didn't get ethical approval for that either.
No clinical trials were had during this relationship. If you watch the Netflix documentary, like Devin said earlier, it is very heavily focused around Benita Alexander's relationship, the lies that he told, the inflations that he told. And it is very eye-opening, and it's a great look into how, like, who he is as a person.
How he pulled it off.
Oh my God. And the stuff that he would say, that he would say, oh, I'm a surgeon to the stars. And like,
Didn't he claim to be like working
Barack
like a
Obama.
CIA surgeon essentially?
Oh, yeah.
And that he was Obama's
Yep,
doctor?
Obama, Bill Clinton. Oh, I am their private surgeon.
That's
and
why
that,
it's top secret.
Yep, and that he helped Hillary Clinton at one point, and he was telling Benita, like, oh,
I wonder
Pope
what the Clintons
Francis,
think of this.
Oh, he's like, the Pope loves me, and the Pope is actually going to officiate our wedding. And all of these celebrities.
I forgot about that.
Isn't that insane? The Pope is going to officiate our wedding.
He's got time.
And now I'm like, are you okay? Like, this man is psychotic. He's not okay.
No.
And also, like, Benita, honey, really?
I mean,
I guess, like, with the national headlines and that, he was just so manipulative that, like, some people can just be so manipulative that they can spin anything and make it like, I believe you.
Did feel bad for her
100%
when she's finding out like the Pope's not doing her wedding and like nothing's planned and everyone's bought tickets and like
it's terrible. It's terrible. He also said that Andrea Bocelli and John were gonna be performing at the wedding. So, you know, I want to come to this party personally. Like, I want to be there. This is like,
and here this girl is thinking that she's like, you know, queen of the world.
Well, that's the thing. She's like, I'm marrying that. And not only that, like, she genuinely loved this guy. And he had like some recordings of him, you know, saying to her, oh, I love you so much. Like, you're my favorite, you know. He traveled so much that they were apart quite a bit. And it turns out he was just like,
that's because he was at home with the wife and kids.
So, I mean, so just to like add that on the pile to, you know, what this guy is.
It just tells what kind of human he is. A terrible, terrible human.
In work and in real life, he is just a general sleazebag.
Self-inflating.
So much. And it's like, it's so sad for her that she got sucked into that whole universe, you know, because it just really destroyed her life there for quite a while. I mean, she had the rug pulled right out from under her. It was so sad.
She was not getting married by the Pope?
Nope. She was not going to watch Andrea Bocelli sing a beautiful rendition of, I don't know, what song? Some wedding
song. Any song.
Yep, any song. So, back to October 2016. Things are starting to kind of heat up for Paolo because people are actually looking at him. And the BBC then broadcast a big 3-part Storyville documentary called Fatal Experiments, The Downfall of a Super Surgeon. And after this special aired, this, again, was shining a little bit more light on the bad outcomes, which is what he does not want. He wants to keep up the facade that everything is fantastic. So, after this airs, KI requests Sweden's National Scientific Review Board to review 6 of Macchiarini's publications about his procedures. So the board does this big review of everything that he has published. This is all just on the stuff that he's published, all the studies, all the papers that he's put out. The board publishes its findings in October 2017, and they concluded that all six of his papers were the result of scientific misconduct.
100%.
That's a 100%, folks. And in particular, by failing to report the complications and deaths that occurred after the interventions, one of the articles actually claimed that the procedure had been approved by an ethics committee, and that did not happen. Nobody approved anything. He's doing his own shit. He's like, oh yeah, I got approval. So the board called for all 6 of his papers to be redacted. No more papers by him.
It was depublished.
Yeah, and then all of the co-authors on all of those papers had also committed scientific misconduct.
Yeah, like, how do you co-author that without being able to back it up?
Well,
Like,
the thing
I
is, he's
get why
like,
he
"Oh,
can
no."
write it because he thinks he's godly and is making it all up. But
So when you're co-authoring something, he's writing the majority of things. He's taking little bits and pieces from colleagues who are participating, but they're trusting him as a member of the medical community. They are trusting him that he has gotten ethical permission to do. He has gotten approval by the ethics committee to do XYZ. He's telling me the right things because why wouldn't he tell me the right data and the right numbers? And they didn't check, and they
yeah.
believed him, just like everybody else
Uh-huh.
in his life. Another report was issued in early September that examined the behavior of the institute, the KI institute he was working for. And it was authored by a committee led by Sten Heckscher. And the report found that the institute had conducted almost no due diligence in hiring Macchiarini. So
Ah,
remember, he inflated his whole resume. He listed all these accolades. He didn't actually have a lot of these accolades.
he couldn't
He
back it up and they didn't check.
Exactly. And then all of these research things that he had published were complete fallacies. It was completely fake. And nobody checked up on him. So actually, the person that sort of spearheaded his onboarding ended up resigning after all of this. Like he was forced to resign.
Yeah.
And after that, he essentially was let go from KI
Mhm.
and no longer practicing with them. So on the 5th of September in 2016, the Swedish government actually moved to dismiss the entire board of the institute. They said the entire board really should have had better oversight on this guy. He obviously was hired under crappy circumstances. He never should have practiced there at all because his resume was drastically inflated. He's
Correct.
lying and saying that you guys are approving all of these surgeries he's doing, and he's not. And you guys are just kind of letting it happen for a lot of years. And a lot of patients died as a result of just really crappy oversight of
Mhm.
one of your surgeons.
Mhm.
So that happened. And then again in 2016, the police get involved
This was a
because
bad year for him.
that 2016 is a shit year. Remember that 2016 was a really bad year for a lot of people.
I got divorced that year.
Yes, you did.
However, then I found my husband, so it ended good.
Was that the year David Bowie died?
Oh God.
And a lot of other really great celebrities died this year. And then I remember reading a tweet back when Twitter was a thing, that was so funny, and everybody loved it. At the very end of 2016, somebody had just said, "Can we put 2016 in rice?
Can we dry it out a little bit and start over?
Can we try to salvage 2016?" Which I thought was so funny, and it's been like almost 10 years since 2016,
Wow.
and I
Who
remember
would
it.
have thought?
So
Gosh.
2016 was a shit year. Okay, so
However, this was
the year.
deserved.
Oh yeah. So the police began getting involved because they're like, yes, he's very cavalier in medicine. He's taking a lot of risks with people's lives, but like, could this be involuntary manslaughter? Like, was he,
I mean,
you know what I mean?
I would go as far as to say that it was voluntary manslaughter
for sure.
because
So after a 1-year medical legal investigation, the Attorney General's office announced in October 2017 that Macchiarini had been negligent in 4 of the 5 cases investigated due to the use of devices not supported by any evidence, but that a crime could not be proven because, again, these might have died under any other treatment that they received because of how
I
sick
get
they
that.
were. I get that too. So it was really tough for the prosecution to prove that he was so cavalier that he was
That it led to
negligent,
their death.
and it led to their deaths.
Correct.
Exactly.
However, I mean, it's fraud.
Oh, for sure. For
And
sure.
he did, I still think it's a crime. Even though you can't prove anything, it absolutely is 100% a crime. And I stand by it.
I agree. And actually, in 2019, like in terms of the fraud piece, he was sentenced by an Italian court to 16 months in prison for abuse of office and forging documents.
Oh,
So
good.
this is what's covering, his
16 months, though, is
falsified.
bullshit.
Oh, it is. It is. But he was ultimately acquitted of all charges by the Supreme Court. Again, because they could not prove.
I forgot about that.
I know. They could not prove that these very sick people without any other options would have died anyways, and that these studies contributed, like these fake studies and these fake papers that he was publishing that had no real data in them, contributed to any bad outcomes. They couldn't prove that.
So, like, but people go to jail for years for fraud, right?
yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
and so is it just because they couldn't prove that this fraud had harm because they were going to likely die anyway?
Well, I'm not actually
Like,
sure.
I'm not a legal mumbo jumbo,
Me neither.
but
And also, this is European law, and I know even less about that. So, like,
I mean, that's factual.
you know what I mean? On September 29th, 2020, Mikhail Bjork, a director of public prosecution in Sweden, indicted Paolo Macchiarini on charges of aggravated assault.
Good.
Yep. Bjork said that he reopened the investigation in 2018, obtained new written evidence, and interviewed individuals in 5 different countries. This was a massive undertaking, huge job that they had in front of them. And Bjork said victims received, quote, serious physical injuries and great suffering as a result of the operations performed on them, and that he made, quote, made the assessment that 3 operations were therefore to be considered as aggravated assault.
Which, like I said earlier, like, you know, they may have were going to die already, but he took away that peaceful passing. You know,
right. He took that
and
choice away from them, right? Because he
yes.
knew what, I mean, he could not, I think maybe he was really trying to just have success, and maybe he was really just trying to tweak things so that he could have a successful outcome. I hope he was. I hope he wasn't just being
A
willy-nilly
masochist.
tell them they were going to have a great outcome when he knew they were not. I
Right.
hope. So, for all of that, Macchiarini was convicted of causing bodily harm, but not convicted of the assault. He received a suspended sentence in June of 2022. And then on June of 2023, though, a year later, his sentence was increased by 2 years and 6 months after being found guilty of gross assault against 3 of his patients by an appeals court in Stockholm. So, his lawyers ended up lodging an appeal to the Supreme Court and were granted time to present the new evidence. The Supreme Court said, "Fuck you, I'm not giving you an appeal."
Fuck you.
And given that Macchiarini had been a resident of Spain for many years, Swedish authorities did decide on March 2024 that he could serve his sentence in Spain if the Spanish authorities agreed, and they did. So the Central Criminal Court in Madrid agreed to this in 2024, and so as of now, Paolo lies in a Spanish prison.
So he is in jail. So he is serving time. And for how long?
For 2 years and 6 months.
It's crap.
It is. It is.
But it's
If
better
you
than
want,
some of the other
though,
outcomes.
oh, it is. If you want like more of a deep dive about this, there are a number of podcasts and documentaries about him. I've already mentioned a few, but Netflix has that documentary, which was released in 2023. If you want to watch it, it's called Bad Surgeon, Love Under the Knife. And
Which
like
really,
I said,
it should have been called Bad Person.
oh yeah, just like bad human, like
Bad
garbage
son
human.
of a bitch.
Garbage human, love under the knife. It's like I said, the bulk of it is actually like an extended interview with Benita Alexander, and she shares a lot about his personal life,
side, yes.
you know, her personal experience. But it's really interesting to watch because it really gives you an idea of just the type of human being this guy is. He's a con artist.
And the snake.
Such a snake
that he is.
He is a snake. He is a professional con artist, and that's who he was in the workplace and as a human being. You can also listen to the multi-part investigative podcast series on the Dr. Death podcast. Their entire season 3, entitled Miracle Man, is about his rise and fall, and again, is very, very interesting. So,
Awesome.
season 4, kicking it off.
Has commenced.
It has commenced! I love this. I love doing this. I missed it. I love you guys, and I miss you guys.
I am glad we're back.
I'm
always
so
always a good, well-needed break. You know, by the time it comes around, I'm ready. But it's also like, hey, we get to do this again.
It's like, yeah, this shit is interesting. I did this because it's really interesting and cool. Okay.
And I missed, you know, we don't interact, you know, really like on, you know, during our break on socials or anything. And
right.
So it's just nice to get back.
It really is. We love you guys, and we want you to stay freaking safe out there. But let's take it away, Devin.
Let's see if I can screw this up.
No, you can't.
If you want to keep listening to us, you can find us on Facebook at Medcrimes Podcast.
You can find us on YouTube by searching Medcrimes Podcast.
You can look for us on Instagram at Medcrimes Podcast.
If you wish to join our fabulous pool of Patreon besties, you can find us at www.patreon.com/medcrimespodcast. And always, always, always rate, review, subscribe. If you haven't done that and you're an avid listener, we would love any rating, any constructive feedback that you guys have for us. And on socials, our Instagram is our big one, but we're also, like Devin said, on Facebook and on YouTube. This particular episode won't have a YouTube video because we are remote, because Devin is under the weather. You can catch us next time as a video on YouTube. The audio, of course, will be on YouTube for you to listen to.
And lastly, if you want to send us any crazy stories, become part of Breakroom Banter at the end of season 4, you can send us any of your information at medcrimes@gmail.com.
One more thing. When you said, hey, let's see if I can screw this up, here's the thing. This is your podcast, baby. You can do whatever the hell you want.
I fucking love that.
I love you.
It's not screwing it up when it's your own thing.
You're just sprinkling some everything bagel seasoning on top of it to give it a little kick.
Give it a little kick. A little boost.
Giving it a little sesame seed flair, baby.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you missed us as much as we missed you.
Oh my God, I did. Stay safe out there. Mwah!
Bye.
Toodles.